Tasting yesterday. When Elena returns after years of being away, the last person she expects to see is Lucas, the man who once shattered her heart. Now their paths cross again, and Lucas, unable to ignore the pull he feels toward her, is determined to right the wrongs of the past. Elena, however, is no longer the same woman she once was. She's moved on, built a life, and is firmly closed off from the past she's tried to bury. But Lucas isn't ready to let go, not without a fight. With every gesture and every attempt to win her back, Elena finds herself caught between her resolve to move forward and the emotions that still tie her to him. As the chase unfolds, they both find themselves questioning everything they thought they knew about love, forgiveness, and what it means to truly heal. As Lucas pushes for a second chance, Elena must decide, will she dare to reopen the door to a love that was once lost, or will the weight of the past keep her locked in a future without him? Can love really survive the test of time, or is it destined to remain a memory? Chapter 1. The Heart That Waited. It's been 10 long years since Elena Kim left the country to study abroad. Back then she was a 20-year-old girl, lost in the throes of unrequited love for Lucas Tan. She had hoped that time and distance would heal the ache in her heart, and now as she waits for her flight back home, she's sure it has. The heartache that once consumed her feels like a distant memory, but the scars remain. Now at 30, Elena is no longer that lovesick girl. She's independent, successful, and no longer defined by her feelings for Lucas. Yet as the airport's bustle surrounds her, her mind drifts back, as it always does, to those long years of yearning. She was only 10 when she first realized it, Elena thought, the memory as vivid as ever. I was so young, so naive, but the feelings I had for him were real. They were never just a childish crush. She had loved Lucas from the moment she understood what love meant. While other kids her age had fleeting crushes, Elena's feelings for him ran deep, more like a slow-burning flame that never went out. As a child, Elena had been the quiet one, always in his shadow, dreaming of a future that would never come to pass. She had always been drawn to him, not just as a cousin or a family friend but as something more. And though Lucas was polite to her, he never returned her feelings. To him she was just another kid, another face in the crowd. Chapter 2. Chasing a Dream. Lucas was 4 years older than Elena, and it was during high school that her obsession with him really took root. She had always admired him from a distance. But it wasn't until she enrolled in the prestigious school where he and her cousin Edward already attended that she was in constant proximity to him. He was a top student, the president of the school's student body, and everyone seemed to be drawn to him, whether for his charm, his intelligence, or his family's reputation. The Tans were one of the wealthiest families in the city, owning a private hospital and several high-end properties. Lucas carried the weight of that legacy effortlessly, always dressed in tailored suits, his presence commanding attention. Elena could never compete with that world. She came from a respectable family. Her parents were university professors, well respected in their fields, but their wealth was modest. Despite her academic achievements, she often felt invisible in the world Lucas inhabited. It wasn't just his wealth that set him apart, it was the ease with which he navigated life, surrounded by friends, admirers, and always with Shannon by his side. Shannon, his girlfriend, came from an equally prestigious family, her father a prominent businessman and her mother a university lecturer. Elena often watched them together, feeling as though she could never measure up. But that didn't stop Elena from hoping. When Elena was about to enter high school, she tried everything she could to follow in Lucas's footsteps. She studied hard to get into the same school where he and Edward were enrolled. She was a shadow to them, trailing behind her cousin Edward as he went about his day. Edward had always been like a protective older brother. Elena often went to Edward's house where she knew Lucas would be there. Despite being the same age, Lucas treated her like a little sister, which only made Elena's feelings more painful. She couldn't help but follow him around, desperately hoping for some sign, any sign, that he might notice her in a way other than as just a cousin's annoying little friend. "Are you sure you're okay, Elle?" Edward asked as they sat in the school library working on an assignment. The flicker of concern in his eyes made Elena feel guilty. Edward was always there for her, like a steady anchor in a storm. He was more than just a cousin, He was her closest friend. Yeah, just tired, Elena replied, avoiding his gaze as she pretended to focus on her work. But she wasn't just tired. She was heartbroken. Edward raised an eyebrow but didn't push further. He knew better than to press her when she was closed off. If you need help with the math project, just ask, okay? Don't keep it all bottled up. Elena nodded, her eyes flicking briefly to the entrance of the library, where Lucas had just walked in, flanked by his friends. She could feel the pang in her chest again, one she had gotten used to over the years. Edward caught her gaze, following her eyes toward Lucas. Still chasing that dream, huh? Elena quickly looked away, her heart beating faster. What do you mean? Edward chuckled softly, but there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. You've been in love with him since you were 10. You think he doesn't notice? He leaned in a little, his voice dropping to a quieter tone. I don't think he sees you the way you see him, Elle. And I hate to see you hurt over it. Elena's chest tightened and she forced a smile, though it felt like the most fragile thing in the world. It doesn't matter. I'm used to it. But the truth was she wasn't used to it. She had spent years hoping for just a glance, a smile, a moment where Lucas would see her as something more than just Edward's cousin, just another face in the crowd. Instead, Lucas was always with Shannon, his girlfriend, and every time she saw them together, it was like a dagger to her heart. Chapter 3. New Beginnings, Old Heartaches. The graduation ceremony was a blur of excitement and sadness. Elena stood in the back watching Lucas, Edward, and Shannon accept their diplomas, their smiles radiating confidence and success. She should have been happy for them, but instead she couldn't shake the feeling of being left behind. Lucas was everything Elena had ever dreamed of: smart, capable, and headed to the top university in the country to study medicine. Edward, her cousin, was right there with him, sharing the same dreams and ambitions. Even Shannon, his perfect girlfriend, would be there too. They were all moving forward, leaving her behind in the dust. But Elena had made a decision. She wouldn't let herself be left out. She couldn't. She had to make something of herself, even if it meant standing in the shadow of the people she loved most. As she watched Lucas shake hands with the dean, her heart squeezed painfully in her chest. She wasn't a part of that world, but she was determined to change that. If they could get into that university, so could she. Elena sat at the kitchen table, her textbooks and notebooks scattered around her. Her mother entered the room, noticing the tension in Elena's shoulders. Elena, her mother said gently, sitting down beside her. You've been studying nonstop. You know you don't have to prove anything to anyone. Elena's gaze was fixed on the textbooks, her hand tracing the spine of a literature book absent-mindedly. I'm not doing this for anyone else. I need to prove it to myself. Her mother smiled softly. You've always had a fire in you even when you were little. But you don't have to chase after other people's dreams to find your own. I'm not chasing anyone's dreams, Elena said, her voice a little sharper than she intended. I'm chasing mine. She paused, looking up at her mother. I want to study literature at the top university in the country. I want to be more than just someone who watches them live their lives. I want to live my own. Her mother nodded, her expression proud but cautious. I understand. Just remember, whatever happens, you're more than enough already. Elena worked harder than she ever had before. She spent hours in the library, reviewing her literature notes and preparing for the entrance exams to the prestigious university. The competition was fierce, and she knew that Lucas, Edward, and Shannon would be there, but she was determined to carve her own path. She couldn't let herself be defined by Lucas's world anymore. She had to make a name for herself. The day of the entrance exam arrived. She shook her head, forcing herself to focus. This isn't about him. It's about me. It always has been. A week later, the acceptance letters were sent out. Elena sat at the kitchen table with her hands trembling as she opened the envelope. Her heart raced as she unfolded the paper, reading the first few lines over and over. We are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted to our prestigious university. A rush of relief and excitement flooded through her. She had done it. But as the excitement began to settle, a new wave of emotions hit her. She was thrilled, yes, but she also felt a quiet, unsettling sense of dread. Would this make it harder to move on? Would seeing Lucas every day make her heart ache more than it already did? But one thing was certain. This was her future now. No longer would she stand in the shadows. She had made her choice. Chapter 4. Longing and Rejection. The prestigious university had lived up to its reputation. Lucas, Edward, and Shannon thrived in their courses, particularly Lucas, who stood out as a top student in the medical program. He was everything Elena had imagined: dedicated, hardworking, and always excelling. He had quickly risen to the top of his class, garnering respect from professors and peers alike. Elena often found herself on the sidelines watching him from a distance, barely a part of his world. She tried, desperately tried, to find ways to interact with him. At first it was small gestures. She would send food to their dormitory, hoping Lucas would notice her. She knew it wasn't much, but it was the only way she could show him she cared. Sometimes she would invite him out for coffee, or suggest they grab a meal together. It always seemed like the perfect moment. But each time, Lucas would send a polite message saying he was too busy or already had plans with Shannon. Instead, it was Edward who would show up, sitting across from her, offering her small talk and polite smiles. Though Elena appreciated his company, it wasn't the same. She didn't want Edward, she wanted Lucas. Every year, without fail, Elena would buy Lucas a thoughtful gift for his birthday. She would agonize over the selection, wanting it to be something special, something that would make him see her as more than just a passing acquaintance. This year she had gotten him a limited edition book on medical advancements, a small token of her admiration for his future career. She waited nervously as she handed it to him in the campus courtyard, her heart pounding in her chest. "Happy birthday, Lucas," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She tried to make it sound casual, but the nervousness in her tone was undeniable. Lucas smiled politely, his usual cool, detached demeanor in place. "Thank you, Elena. This is thoughtful." He glanced at the gift for a moment before looking back at her with that faint, distant smile. "I appreciate it." That was all. Nothing more. No excitement, no warmth, just a polite acknowledgement. Elena smiled, trying to hide the ache in her chest. It was always the same. She was grateful for the barest form of recognition, even though it never felt like enough. She had come to expect it by now, but it didn't make the sting of rejection any easier. The days blended into one another, but Elena's feelings for Lucas never wavered. She still watched him from afar as he moved through his life, surrounded by friends and Shannon. Elena couldn't help but notice the way Lucas cared for Shannon, how he always took the time to listen to her, how he held her hand in public, and how gentle and patient he was with her. It crushed Elena every time she saw them together. Lucas was everything she had ever dreamed of, and he was giving all of his love and attention to Shannon. Elena had to face the truth. She would never be the one to receive that kind of love from him. She wasn't the one he cared about. The loneliness settled in deep. She knew it wasn't healthy to keep hoping. But how could she stop? Every small interaction, every moment of eye contact, even the briefest smile from Lucas felt like a fragile thread that kept her holding on. As Elena entered her senior year, she felt the weight of time pressing on her. She knew that after graduation things would change. She might never see Lucas again. The thought of leaving university without ever having told him how she felt was unbearable. One evening, as she sat in the quiet of her room, she made a decision. She had to let go, and the only way to do that was to finally face the truth. She couldn't keep living with this lingering hope, this ache that refused to fade. It was time to confess. She called Edward, her cousin who had always been supportive of her, though he had never truly understood her feelings for Lucas. "Edward, can you help me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I need to talk to Lucas. I need him to know how I feel." Edward didn't ask why, and he didn't hesitate. "I'll talk to him. I'll set it up." The next day they met at a small cafe on the edge of the city. The atmosphere was quiet, intimate, and Elena tried to steady her nerves. She knew this moment could be one of the most painful of her life, but she had to do it. She couldn't let herself wonder what if for the rest of her life. When Lucas arrived, his face was calm, unreadable, just as it had always been. He greeted Elena with a polite smile and sat down across from her. Elena could feel her heart racing, the words she had rehearsed so many times in her mind now slipping away. "Lucas," she began, her voice shaking slightly. "I've wanted to tell you this for so long, and I don't want to leave here with regrets. I've loved you for as long as I can remember, and I can't keep pretending that I don't feel this way." There was a long silence. Elena could feel the tension in the air, her own heart pounding painfully in her chest. She stared at Lucas, trying to read his expression, but he was the same as always, cool, distant, his eyes unreadable. Finally Lucas spoke. "Elena," he sighed, looking down at his coffee cup before meeting her gaze. "I don't want to hurt you, but I need to be honest. I don't see you that way. I never have." His voice was gentle but firm. "I've tried to avoid this conversation because I didn't want to hurt you, but the truth is I just don't feel the same." Elena felt the world tilt beneath her feet, and her heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. She had known it was coming, but hearing the words from him still cut deeper than anything she had ever felt before. She nodded, trying to hold herself together, though tears blurred her vision. "I understand," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I needed to know." Lucas shifted uncomfortably, looking at her with something that could almost be described as pity. "I'm sorry, Elena. I don't want things to be awkward between us, but this was never going to happen. You kept pushing me and I kept trying to let you down gently, but you wouldn't listen." Elena nodded, trying to fight the lump in her throat. "I won't bother you anymore," she said, her voice breaking. Elena left the cafe feeling both lighter and heavier at the same time. The weight of her confession had lifted, but the rejection still stung. The truth was out, and now she could finally begin to heal. Her footsteps felt heavy as she fumbled with her phone, her hands trembling. She dialed Rachel's number, and as soon as her best friend answered, Elena could barely hold back the tears. "Rach, it's over," Elena's voice cracked. "He doesn't feel the same way. He never did." Rachel's voice was soft, yet strong, a steady anchor in Elena's storm of emotions. "I knew this was coming, Elle. But I'm so sorry. You don't deserve that. You deserve someone who sees you, who loves you for everything you are." The tears Elena had been holding back for so long spilled over. She let herself cry, the grief she'd carried for so many years finally finding its way out. It was a catharsis, painful yet necessary. After a long silence, Rachel spoke again, her voice thick with emotion. "I know it's hard, but you have to accept it. Lucas won't love you the way you've loved him, and you deserve so much more than that. You'll find someone who truly values you, who will love you wholeheartedly." Elena wiped her eyes, feeling the weight of Rachel's words settle in her chest. "I know, Rach. I do. I don't know how to move on." Rachel sighed, her tone gentle but firm. "You're going to graduate soon, Elle. And after that, there's nothing stopping you from focusing on your future. There's a whole world out there for you to explore. Time will heal the wound, but you have to let it." Elena nodded, even though Rachel couldn't see her. The thought of moving forward felt both terrifying and freeing. "I'll try," Elena whispered. As she walked down the quiet street, she realized that facing the truth was the only way she could move on. She had spent so many years wishing for a love that would never be, but now it was time to build a future of her own, one where she was no longer tethered to a dream that would never come true. She wasn't sure what her future would look like, but for the first time in years, Elena felt a flicker of hope. She would be okay. Chapter 5. A new chapter. The days following her conversation with Rachel were a blur. Graduation came and went, but it felt like a distant memory, a milestone that Elena had crossed, but with no real joy in her heart. She had accomplished so much, yet all she could think about was the pain of seeing Lucas and Shannon together, knowing that she would never be the one to fill that space in his life. When Elena walked into her parents' house after the ceremony, she felt a weight pressed down on her chest. She didn't have to say a word for her parents to know. They could see it in her eyes, her smile was forced, her shoulders hunched with the weight of unspoken grief. Her father looked up from his plate during dinner, concern etched in his features. "You've been quiet, Elena," he said softly, his voice filled with fatherly worry. "How are you holding up? You know you can always talk to us." Elena tried to smile, but it was no use. I'm fine, she said, her voice hollow. Her mother exchanged a glance with her father, both of them sensing that something more was at play. They had always known Elena better than she knew herself. Her father cleared his throat, his tone turning thoughtful. Your mother and I have been talking. You've worked so hard and we're proud of you. But you've always had a passion for writing, Elena. Maybe it's time to take the next step. Have you thought about pursuing a master's degree? Maybe even a creative writing program? Elena looked at her father, unsure of what to say. Her heart was still raw, and the idea of returning to school, of diving into something new, felt like both an opportunity and a challenge. But perhaps it was the right time. She needed something to pull her out of the shadow of Lucas's rejection. Her father continued, Your Aunt Clara lives in Country A. It's a place where you can focus on your studies. And maybe, just maybe, it'll be the change you need to heal. To start fresh. Elena paused, her gaze drifting toward the window, where the last rays of the setting sun painted the sky in soft hues. The idea of leaving everything behind, of escaping to a new country, felt both terrifying and like a lifeline. Maybe you're right, Elena said quietly, more to herself than to her parents. Maybe it's time for a fresh start. A few days later, Elena made her decision. She would go. It was time to build her own life, to finally start living for herself and not for a love that would never be returned. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, Elena felt the stirrings of hope. Time, Rachel had said, would heal her heart. And perhaps, just perhaps, Country A would help her find the peace she had been searching for. Chapter 6. A New Beginning. As the plane took off, carrying Elena away from everything she had known, she closed her eyes and whispered to herself, This is the beginning of something new. The flight to Country A felt like the longest journey of Elena's life. She had spent the entire flight staring out the window, watching the clouds drift by, the vast expanse of the world beneath her. For the first time in months, Elena felt a strange mix of excitement and apprehension. She was leaving behind her past, her old life, and the heartbreak that had defined her for far too long. As the plane descended toward the bustling city below, Elena's thoughts turned to her parents and Rachel, both of whom had encouraged her to take this step. Her parents, with their quiet love and unwavering support, had insisted this was the right choice. Rachel, with her words of comfort and her belief in Elena's strength, had been the one to remind her that the pain wouldn't last forever. But still there was the nagging uncertainty. What if this new chapter didn't bring the peace she so desperately sought? The moment Elena stepped off the plane and into the airport, the foreignness of it all hit her. The signs were written in a different language, the sounds of the people speaking around her unfamiliar. For a moment she felt like a small fish in an ocean of unfamiliarity. But with each step the weight in her chest seemed to lighten. Aunt Clara was there to greet her at the airport, her face warm and welcoming. She wrapped Elena in a tight hug, and for the first time in months, Elena felt something akin to comfort. You look like you could use some rest, Aunt Clara said with a smile, taking Elena's bag from her. Let's get you to the apartment and then you can unpack. Don't worry, everything will be okay. The apartment was cozy and modern, tucked away in a quiet part of the city. Elena admired the small touches of home, framed photos of her aunt's family on the walls, the soft colors of the furniture, the plants lining the windowsill. It felt peaceful, like a sanctuary from the storm she had left behind. That evening, after unpacking, Elena found herself sitting on the balcony, looking out over the city. The lights twinkled below and the distant hum of traffic filled the air. She realized that she had never been so far from home before, and yet there was something exhilarating about it. She was free to be herself, to start over. But it was also lonely. The city was full of life, but Elena still felt the weight of her memories. She closed her eyes and let the cool breeze wash over her, trying to push the past away. Elena stood in front of her new school, her heart racing. The campus was sprawling with impressive buildings and lush green spaces. She had never been in a school quite like this before, and the thought of diving into a master's program in creative writing made her both nervous and excited. She walked to her first class, a creative writing workshop, where she would meet her fellow students. As she entered the room, she was greeted by a sea of unfamiliar faces. The professor, an older woman with short gray hair and sharp eyes, welcomed everyone and began to speak about the class expectations. Elena took a seat near the back, her hands trembling slightly. She hadn't written much since her heartbreak, and the idea of opening herself up in front of strangers felt terrifying. But as the class progressed, she found herself relaxing. The professor encouraged students to share their stories, their personal struggles, and the creative process behind their writing. It reminded Elena of why she had chosen to come here in the first place, to rediscover her love for writing, to find her voice again. After class, as Elena packed up her things, a voice spoke to her. "Hey, are you new here?" Elena turned to see a girl with short, curly hair and a bright smile. She looked around, her age, maybe a year or two older. "Yeah," Elena replied, still feeling a little awkward. "Just arrived last week." "I'm Mia," the girl said, extending a hand. "I'm in this program too. If you need any help getting around or just want to hang out, let me know." Elena smiled and shook her hand. "Thanks, I might take you up on that." Mia grinned. "You'll love it here. It's a great place to find yourself. And the food, don't even get me started." Elena laughed, feeling a little more at ease. "I'm looking forward to it." Over the next few days, Mia became Elena's first real friend in Country A. They explored the city together, from bustling markets to quiet cafes tucked away on side streets. Mia showed Elena the best spots for writing and gave her a crash course in local customs. Slowly but surely, Elena began to feel more at home. One afternoon, after a long day of class, the two of them sat at a small cafe by the river. The golden light of the setting sun reflected off the water, casting a soft glow on everything around them. "So tell me about your life back home," Mia said, sipping her coffee. "What made you decide to come here?" Elena hesitated, unsure how much she wanted to share. But she found herself opening up. She told Mia about her heartbreak, her years spent loving someone who couldn't return those feelings, and how she felt like she was stuck in a life that wasn't truly hers. Mia listened without judgment, her eyes empathetic. "I get it," she said quietly. "I came here to escape too. But it's not just about running away. It's about finding something new, something that's all yours." Elena nodded, feeling the truth of Mia's words sink in. She wasn't just running from her past, she was running toward her future. She was creating her own story now. As they sat there, watching the city come alive in the golden light, Elena realized that while her heart was still healing, she was no longer burdened by the past. She had come to Country A to start fresh, and she was doing just that, one step at a time.